Hey, everybody. Welcome to Perpetual Motion, a podcast focused on wellness, personal development, and positive relationships. I'm your host, Dr. Mo Anderson. In today's episode, we are chatting with Bridget Cook-Burch, a storyteller, trainer, and humanitarian helping others discover the importance of their own story. Welcome, Bridget.
Thank you, Dr. Mo. I'm so pleased to be here, and I know we got a lot of good stuff to cover.
Indeed, we do. As a New York Times, Wall Street Journal, and international best-selling author, you say words and stories can change the world. How so?
Oh my goodness, in 1,000 different ways. The biggest ways that I would say is just that we believe in the power of story, and we all have our favorite stories
Mhm.
that we love and believe in. And the biggest question I think for most of us are these stories of possibilities or limitations? And when we are willing to dive deep to explore our stories, we recognize patterns that we might not have seen before.
Mm.
And we recognize we've got some mad skill sets to rise beyond whatever comes towards us, and that we're more resilient and more not just enigmatic, but we're more of everything than we ever dreamed of, which is beautiful.
That is a beautiful thing, and I I'm looking forward to exploring that. But in the resilience part and just our own creativity and our inner spirit and inner strength, we just so take that for granted, and the necessity of tapping into that, which you can do with your story. How did your journey as a writer begin?
Well, I actually had kind of a fascinating beginning in mine. I was an avid reader when I was a child, and so I always thought it would be beautiful to be a writer in the mountains, which I am
Mhm.
now.
Nice.
But it wasn't one of those, expected left brain job ideas, I think.
Mhm.
So I didn't expect that is a profession that I would go into. Then I had two amazing things that happened. One was a near death experience. So I was in the hospital and I'm listening to nurses outside in the corridor, and they say she's not going to make it until morning. And
Wow.
I almost passed, and I had a presence that came into my room and told me I was being given a second chance at life. And it rocked my world. And when I was able to leave the hospital under very miraculous circumstances, the beauty of it was that I was able to look into the mirror and see love there for the very first time in my life, and also to look into anyone's eyes. And it was like I was gifted to see the possibilities and the love that was there. And it was such a beautiful thing to where, like, I could work with gang kids and high
Mhm.
risk youth and people from the streets and all kinds of things, but I was not afraid of them. I would love people and their stories, and I could see beyond the barriers of belief. So that was a beautiful thing. Also, from that hospital experience, I wasn't supposed to be able to have any kids at all. So no one was more shocked than my doctor to discover that I was pregnant. And here I was, my husband and I, we were, both very career oriented,
Mhm.
and I wanted to be an envoy in Washington, D.C. and do certain things. And he was in technology.
Mhm.
And then all of a sudden, getting pregnant was like, oh, what are my priorities? Where do I want to be spending my time? And I was able to develop a business while I was at home with my young daughter, where I got to do PR and write. And it was such a natural skill set. And I just found miracle after miracle taking place with this new ideology that I had, this
Mhm.
new philosophy on life and a second chance, and wanting to fulfill the measure of my creation. And then also just being able to really see humanity for what it is, and see the power of story. So my clients call me the book whisperer. That is, a special gift
Mhm.
that, I'll be honest with you, comes from above, and I 1,000% recognize that. And this is what has gotten me started on that incredible journey.
Wow. That unfortunate accident was transformational in many ways, it seems, both spiritually and physically. And that part about kids, I understand so much, because I in the 10th grade I had decided to be a dentist, and I'm a writer like you. I don't remember deciding to be a writer. We're kind of born that way. But I was, I had my mind just focused, set on what I wanted to do. And then the my son came, and wow, you don't know what you don't know. It's like I didn't know to aspire to this, because I didn't realize how amazing it is. That's the one thing about my life I absolutely know I would never change. So
Good for
I'm just
you.
well, I love that you shared that. And I have to ask as well, you say that you could look at people and see love, and the Great Commission, we are to love one another. But what did you see before, when you
I
looked at
think
people and yourself?
Yeah, I think, well, I grew up under some unusual circumstances. I was adopted. I had three sets of parents by the time I was 6 months old.
Oh my.
And I had really incredible, very unconditionally loving parents. And yet there were stories that I told myself about I must have not been good enough, pretty enough, smart enough,
Mm-hmm.
whatever. So I had that deep wounding that I looked
Mm-hmm.
at the world from. And so when I had my near death and I was told, "Oh, you are enough," and there was so much unconditional love in that room, like, you know, uh, there was no thought as to what my grades were or weren't, what my relationships were or weren't. There was
Mm-hmm.
just love.
Wow.
And so it was such a difference to come from not enough at all to
Mm-hmm.
suddenly, oh wow, I'm loved no matter what, that it changed my whole world. And so that was a really beautiful thing. And then to know how deeply valued and important every
Mm-hmm.
single person is.
Yes.
And before, I think I was afraid of a lot of people and humanity and other things, just because, how we're taught, and don't go on this side of the tracks, and those kinds of things. And all of a sudden I
Mm-hmm.
was deeply fascinated from about people from all walks of life. Like,
Right.
I've just been voraciously eating it up. People are so juicy, and the stories, you just can't make it up. Like, I love
No.
to write fiction, but
Mm-hmm.
nonfiction constantly knocks my socks off.
Yeah. That's pretty amazing. And all of that resonates with me so much. As a writer, I'm curious, what is your favorite and least favorite part of the writer's life?
Oh, Dr. Mo, that's a really good question. My favorite is when things begin coalescing,
Mhm.
when what I've have pictured up here is actually getting out onto the page in
Yeah.
a way where I read something and I'm deeply moved, and that I know it's going to deeply move a reader. When the transformation that I know is possible is laid out on the page, that's the glorious part. The not so glorious part is just all the time it takes to create best-selling writing. And a lot of people, they just want to write an expensive business card and, hey,
Mhm.
I'm a published author, I got this done. And that feels good. And it's important because a lot of people want to write a book and they never get it done. So
Mhm.
anyone that gets a book written and published, I applaud them. And
Kudos.
and
Likewise.
then I also like to take it one level further, or sometimes 10 levels further, into
Mhm.
what really constitutes a best-selling story that can transform people's lives, where the written word is just that powerful. And so it takes more research, it takes more time, it takes more drafts, it takes a little more meticulousness and the
Mhm.
allowance of creativity. And sometimes I don't like how long it takes, but I also have come to trust in divine timing too.
Right. Right. And the end result is obviously worth it. And for those who aren't writers, you may liken it to cooking. You can tell the difference. I served a dish that a friend made over Thanksgiving, and my son tried. It was some greens, some collard greens, and my youngest son tried, and he goes, "You didn't cook these. This is somebody who can really cook these." and
And you're like, "Ooh, thanks, darling."
we're very transparent in my household, but he was correct. A chef friend of mine had indeed cooked those greens, and there's just it's those extra components that make a New York Times best-selling author from good writer, but it's the extra time and the tidbits. So I applaud you for that. Becoming a New York Times best-selling author is, like you said, anyone who writes a book, but then to get to that level, you deserve applause and acclaim for that. And I'm very happy for you reaching those heights.
Well,
Let's
thank you for that.
You are welcome. You are welcome. Let's talk about a little bit more how our own stories, can transform ourselves and the lives of others. How critically important are the stories we tell ourselves, whether we're writing a book or just working to thrive in our everyday lives?
Yeah, well, it's really fascinating. Anybody that has done any work in psychology, psychiatry,
Hmm.
you being a dentist, you hear all kinds of stories as well. Not as many because their mouths are open most of the time, but you still, you follow them through, and you can see, what we believe about ourselves and also the world around us dictates how much energy we're going to put forth into a job, a project, a relationship, whatever it might be. If we believe the story that the whole world is against us, that that's how the world is going to show up for us. That's
Yes.
just, because we'll only be seeing those negative things and people and situations and circumstances. But if we believe that we're here for a purpose, and we start to do the work on ourselves where we look back at reflections on patterns in our lives and where we've had some hard lessons, and did I
Mhm.
learn this and overcome it, or did I have to learn it a couple more times before I got
Yeah.
it? And yeah, like most normal humans. Um, but we also begin to see, like, I love the work I've done
Mhm.
with some older, beautiful people who say, "Do you know what? After all these years, I like me better now. I
Mm.
understand me better now." And all of a sudden, the whole world opens. The shame and the judgment just walks off the court. It's no longer playable, and what is there on the court are like, wow, these are the victories that I have hard won. And this is more of who I really am. And then stepping into the present and the future
Mhm.
as this more enlightened being, because you recognize the gifts that you bring to the table and the gift that you are, rather than thinking of yourself as a curse or a loser or someone
Right.
who's just, there's no reason for you to be here on the planet. Like,
Wow.
if anyone if anyone is having a struggle with wanting to be alive, I know that if they begin to work on their story, that will become transformed. They may need to have some therapy because they
Sure.
probably have some reasons behind those feelings.
Right.
And by doing this work, I don't know if you've seen any of the amazing research. I absolutely love this. By writing, especially if you write by hand, but sometimes we can formulate that with our fingers on
Mhm.
the keyboard as well, is we take an experience that happened to us in our life and we relive it, and we can have some, anxiety, fear, sadness,
Mhm.
some of those feelings come up in our body. But as we stick with it and we put it on the page, what it does is it takes it from the survival, fight, flight portion of the brain,
Mhm.
and it puts into the more objective, rational part of the brain. And so it's like EMDR and some of these other really strong
Right.
modalities that lower the triggers,
Mhm.
like, because you're seeing it, you're witnessing what you went through almost from like a third perspective, and you can give yourself credit.
Yeah.
It is fantastically healing and incredibly powerful.
I have seen some of the research, and I interviewed another guest, Linda Jones, and she's a doula. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. And
You
she leads
are.
people in workshops and retreats like you do. And she shared some similar stories. And it's the point you made about opening up and sharing your experience. A lot of times people are afraid because of the shame or having made mistakes, which all of us have done, but we, limit ourselves to thinking it's just me. But you're also bearing wisdom and lessons learned and experiences that could help other people as part of our loving one another. And you're right, you get it out on the page. I've written some things. I'm sure other people have gone from their journal to a book or whatever, and all of a sudden you realize, you know what, one, nobody cares, but in terms of trying to shame you, but two, and this has probably happened to you, all the people you meet who've shared that experience, and they're so grateful that you talked about it, and you liberated
Yeah.
them and yourself.
I have a book that came out in 2022, and it's called Divine Turbulence, that I wrote with Gary Lee Price. And he's the sculptor of the Statue of Responsibility that we're going to see in our lifetime up on the West Coast. It was part of Dr. Viktor Frankl's dream that
Mhm.
the United States have a Statue of Responsibility, because he said you can't have liberty without responsibility.
Responsibility.
And Gary created this beautiful
Oh,
statue monument. There's going to be a
mhm.
35-footer in
Wow.
California soon, and then a 350-footer, which is going to be just this beautiful, fantastic thing. But Gary grew up with intense abuse. He lost his mother and father in murder
Mhm.
suicide, went from the frying pan into fiery torment of abuse and enslavement, and
Mhm.
nobody knew because the parents were working nights, and that's when all the abuse took place.
Oh, wow.
And uh, at one point, Gary had to decide if he was going to let all of these experiences make him a bitter person or a better person.
Mhm.
And he found God and he found art, and his whole world exploded in a beautiful and magnificent way. And so he's still human, ups and downs, and
Of course.
nothing is ever perfect, but he's this prolifically beautiful artist who
Mhm.
has portrayed human emotion in such a wonderful way. And to your point, Dr. Mo, um, he at first was nervous about, how do I discuss my abuse, especially the sexual abuse that happened by an older brother.
Mhm.
And that in the family that was married into. And
Mhm.
so he was like, I'm not sure about this. And it was a difficult way to begin the book, was through these traumas. And yet every single day, Gary Lee Price gets emails and text messages from other men in particular, but men and women, who say, I never had enough courage to talk about what happened to me. I now
Thank
feel
you.
like I can heal. Like
Mhm.
every day he's getting these texts. And so I love how you said that we can go through something, express it in story, show how we overcame it, and it becomes a gift. I call it the elixir of life on the hero's
I like
journey.
that.
Yeah, but it becomes this gift that we have to offer the world. We're no longer a victim.
Mhm.
We're such a victor that we have a gift. And I love that he's expressing that everywhere. So
Right. That's beautiful. Thanks for sharing that. And that's a great example, a true example, not just an analogy. That's a beautiful example. You host retreats and workshops, Bridget, for others to help them write their story. What are some of the transformations you have seen among your clients when they allow themselves to tell an honest and authentic story? I mean, we heard Gary's story. I'm not sure if he was a client of yours, but have you had, can you share something about clients, confidentially, confidentiality, of course, but I'd love to hear how those workshops and retreats, how they've helped others.
um, part of the premise of the Inspired Writers Retreat is to create a safe place for people to be able to explore their stories, and
Mhm.
to be able uh, to beautifully express themselves, and to figure out how are they going to outline and formulate their book. and the myriad of ways that we have now to publish and things. So we go through the business aspect, but we spend a great deal of time on experiential exercises, and then also writing deep and rich experiences, including some of the hard things.
Mhm.
And what is really beautiful about that, Dr. Mo, is that, oftentimes, whether consciously or unconsciously, we're afraid to express, especially out on paper, some of our deepest dark.
Right.
We get afraid it might get used against us, or people will no longer accept us or like us. And for centuries, our
Mhm.
DNA has said, you got to fit in or you may not survive.
Mhm.
And so we're fighting against our own DNA. And yet when we put it on the page and we're in a supportive setting where what happens at the Inspired Writers Retreat stays at the Inspired Writers Retreat, but people will share their writing and experiences. And wow, do I see people take off. So people who've come from abusive backgrounds, people who have made severe mistakes in their life and are trying to make up for those, all different kinds of
Mhm.
things I've been able to see. And so there is something really beautiful in the big book. If you're familiar with that, with the 12 steps, one of the
Mhm.
things that they talk about is that we're only as sick as our secrets. And I have found that to be so true. So when you can write and be transparent and be in a supportive community, whether it's at my retreat or another situation or community that you find, and suddenly you're like, okay, I'm simply a messy human, and humanity is messy, and
Yes.
this is part of that messy human journey. And then you can come to love and accept and be compassionate for yourself. Suddenly you have power over your story instead of your story having power over you. And that is the magic that takes place. So I've seen that with housewives and house dads, right? I have seen that with doctors and nurses and
Mhm.
FBI agents. You name it, no matter what spectrum of life people have come from, when they do this work, it opens huge and amazing doors. And many of them will go out and write those books. And some of them, this transformation enables Netflix series and all
Mhm.
different kinds of expression of their stories that before were blocked. Because Dr. Mo, I know you've heard of imposter syndrome.
Oh,
We
yes.
all get it. We
Mhm.
all get it.
Oh, yeah.
And what's wonderful about like the retreat and sharing writing and sharing stories and seeing the humanity between each person is the imposter syndrome. It doesn't go away completely because we still always have it when something magnificent's about to happen, like your book is
Right.
ready
Oh,
to come out and you're
challenge.
like, I'm so excited. Oh my God, I'm so scared,
I
right?
can't do this. I can't do this.
We get some of that still, but no longer to the same extent.
Mhm.
And I will share with you one story that really affected me deeply and personally. We had a beautiful
Mhm.
Native American from one of the tribes on the West Coast, and he came on a beautiful scholarship to our Inspired Writers Retreat. He was one of the main players at Standing Rock. And he came and he shared his story. And after everyone had shared in the circle, he said, because people will often get teary eyed, because it's tender and emotional and it's
Sure.
very
Yeah.
much humanity
Beautiful.
talking to humanity. And he said, I came here thinking I was going to be around a lot of rich white people and that we would have nothing in common. And he said, I realized from story that we have everything in common. And he said, story was taken from us and our tribe.
Mhm.
Like we were not allowed to tell our stories, keep
Mm.
our culture, continue with our beliefs. But I'm going to take stories back to the teens
Wow.
that I'm teaching. I'm going to reincorporate story into our culture. And I was like, yes, that
Yeah.
was his own personal transformation and the gift he brought back.
Yeah.
So it's
Wow.
it's just magnificent what people are able to do.
It sounds like it. It sounds like a great environment, a wonderful experience. And what I'm hearing is that people come there with, their limiting beliefs, like one even he had, and they leave there with the limitless possibilities and just being way more open to experience and to engage with other people, and that in itself is worth it, even if you don't have a book come out of it, just to have that change inside of you and being more open. So um
Yes,
and you
which I
mentioned,
love. And then I love it when they complete their books and get it out into the world
yeah,
too.
even better, even better. Now, and speaking of books, many people are aspiring authors, and we both know writing a book is only the beginning. Let's talk about
Mhm.
the next step to that. What do you recommend for those thinking of both writing and publishing a book?
Well, that's a really good question. I will say this
Hmm.
is that no matter how magnificent your book is, it's only going to get out into the world as far as you're going to allow yourself to be visible. And so, one of the things I
Hmm.
strongly, as a businesswoman, suggest to people that as they're working on their story and writing their book, that they also be taking steps to be visible in the world. Like you're figuring out what your elixir of life is, what your gift is,
Hmm.
then let your social media grow and reflect that. Gain more followers, because more followers means more readers, more people who are already interested in you, and now they're going to want to read your book and be affected by it. So
Right.
that would be something that I would strongly suggest, is that you start now, even just a little at a time. And you don't have to be a social media maven. You don't have to be on every single platform that's out there. You don't have to be on TikTok if that's not where your avatar
Right.
that you're writing your book for is hanging out. But just
Hmm.
pick one or two places where you can really shine. And you can even get college students or high school students, as long as they're hearing your voice and
Hmm.
they're, me, I would be careful about grammar and spelling, but
Yes.
but that
Yes.
that they would portray you well, but begin to elevate your visibility on that social media, and they can help you with the tech stuff, and then you just pour yourself out and get more seen. So that's important. And then the
Hmm.
other thing is just to recognize, like, we're living in this extraordinary time. Like in the past, that history was dictated by those who won the wars, who ruled the roost. It was always the victors were the ones that would write the history books, write books in general.
Right.
And over the last half century, we have really turned the wheel on that one to the point where anyone can write a book and get published. You can buy an ISBN number tonight and be published
Hmm.
by tomorrow on Amazon in an ebook format. So
Yeah.
it's incredible, the power at our fingertips for us to own
Hmm.
our voices and get something out there. And um, and then my caveat of make good business decisions. Navigating the
Hmm.
waters can be a little scary, because if you Google, how do I write a book, you're going to get thousands of resources, and they don't all agree with each other. And do I spend the money? Do I do this? What do I do? It can be disconcerting. So there are a lot of people out there with programs who have written maybe a little ebook, and now they've made some money and made a little fame, so now they're putting a course out on how to write a book and make some money
Hmm.
and make some fame. And then there's other people who are like, I want from you your bestseller. Like, let's create something
Right.
legendary and epic. Let's, if you're going to fillet yourself like a fish out on paper for everyone to see, let's make sure that it's bestseller epic quality. So I recommend that you find a mentor, or that you find a program, but something that has a great reputation, and that you can talk to
Right.
referrals and they'll be like, oh my gosh, yes, for this, and this reason.
Right.
And then, there's traditional publishing was always the way that you were supposed to go if you wanted to have a good reputation, because if
Hmm.
you self-published back in the day, that was called vanity press,
Hmm.
and it wasn't looked on very highly by much of the literary world and some of the other worlds. But coaches, leaders, speakers, healers
Hmm.
started this new trend of, hey, I don't want to wait for traditional publishing. I've got a program to put out. I've got
Right.
stage presentations. I got people's lives to touch and heal. I'm not going to wait around for someone to think
Yeah.
I'm good enough. And so they started this whole self-publishing and also
Mm-hmm.
indie publishing craze, which is so fantastic because it means, Dr. Mo, for ordinary individuals that with extraordinary stories that you might be able to get traditionally published if there is a want and a need and it's
Mm-hmm.
relevant for the market and the community at the moment. But no matter what, your book can get out into the world. And that
Yeah.
has allowed some really extraordinary works to reach us that never would have in the past. And
Yeah.
they are now. So it's an exciting time to
It
be an
is.
author.
The gatekeepers are gone, and they you had to they had the readers, you had to get past them, and you had to have an agent, and just even trying to get an agent was an ordeal, let alone trying to, pitch to publishers unsolicited manuscripts. And I'm glad all of that is gone. And it's changed the publishing industry as well. Now they're out seeking authors because so many people are like, you know what, I really don't even have to deal with all of that. And there's still a lot in regards to distribution that's wonderful about the traditional publishing. I've done both, and I like the control better. I like control over my covers. I like, the layout. I've got great editors, so there are a lot of ways you can go about it, but you don't have to not do it because you don't know someone at a big publishing house, and
Exactly.
your story can be out in the world. And I want to add to what you said as well, to caution people about the vanity publishers, the commercials. We can get your book out, we can help you. Just be really, really careful, because a lot of that is about making money from the authors and not so much making money from promoting and selling your book or even doing a professional job on it. I've seen some really, really bad things happen there. So, you aspiring authors, you want to be like Bridget Cook-Burch. You need to do it the right way with the right people. So just be careful who you trust your story to. And
Mhm.
we'll definitely put in the show notes information about how to contact you and learn more about your workshops and your books and so forth, because you are just fascinating, and you are a good example of what we can do with our stories and with our experiences. What
Thank you, Dr.
are
Mo. Appreciate that.
You're most welcome. You're most welcome. I want to uh, go back to women and our stories and our challenges, which we kind of started out with. You so kindly shared your story. What are some of the most significant areas you see women holding themselves back in leadership in particular, and what can be done?
Mm. Well, we've seen some extraordinary trends lately. COVID did something in which, so many women chose to walk away from the corporate ladder, stay
Right.
home, help teach their kids, get their families stable, be on track. And both women and men, also, a lot of them started doing their own gigs, and leaving corporate and doing, the gig mentality, which in itself is a form of self mastery and self leadership. So I don't have any problem with that. I think it's amazing.
Hmm.
But what it also has done in terms of corporate is it has left a dearth of women in leadership positions. In the United States, we were starting to gain some traction.
Hmm.
And, there are other countries in the world that are really doing well in this arena. And we were still, not having the same pay, not having the same range of players of women
Hmm.
in
Right.
these corporate positions and leaderships. Small, medium, and large positions of leadership,
Hmm.
and we've kind of been set back again. But I also think that two things. Number one is that leadership does not have to be looked at or believed in the way that it was taught to us at one time.
Oh.
And so, just because you're not a CEO of a high ranking corporate
Hmm.
entity on the NASDAQ doesn't mean that you're not have an incredibly effective team doing, earth shattering or
I
wonderful or
agree.
just effective work out in the world,
I
right?
agree.
So I think for women, it's very important to decide two things. Number one, you may have heard of ikigai. I love it's the Japanese word for your reason for breathing,
Hmm.
right? What is your reason for breathing? What is your why on the planet? Why are you here? What do you want to do with your life? And I think passion has so much to do with happiness.
Hmm.
And so if you can be passionate about something, you're more likely to show up as a leader because
Right.
you're going to have time, energy, and resources to devote to that. So going for something you're passionate about. And also, women have a tendency to have our eye on social causes much more frequently than men, but there
Hmm.
are often, great men that are doing the same thing. Women have a tendency to marry the two. And I'll share with you a story. I wrote a book called The Witness Wore Red with Rebecca Musser, and she was
Hmm.
the 19th wife here in the United States, 19th wife of 65 women. And
Wow.
she was married to the prophet of the FLDS church. And Warren Jeffs, who became the prophet
Hmm.
pedophile, he was her son, not physically by birth, because she was only 19 years old when she was forced to marry an 86-year-old man. And he was 92 when he died. And so she's still this young woman, and Warren's trying to force her to marry him. And he married
Hmm.
35 of his father's young wives. She just wanted to be put out to pasture, and she didn't want to have to deal with men and having to be violated in the name of God. And she ended up escaping and has this extraordinary story of escape that we wrote about in the book. But there
Wow.
came a time when Warren Jeffs he was building a temple on the YFC ranch in Texas. And young girls were disappearing, just poof, from some of the other communities. And they were ending up in Texas. And Rebecca knew who Warren was, that he was a pedophile, what he was about. And she was
Hmm.
worried about her little sisters along with other people.
Of course. Yeah.
And here's what I want to share with you is at one point she had an opportunity to decide, am I going to just keep quiet about what is happening here, or will I be the face of the faceless and the voice of the voiceless, for because no one stood up for me when I was forced to marry an old man. No one stood up for my desires or my wants or my healthy sexuality or my healthiness as a woman, as a human being. And she decided, I still get emotional about it. She took this extraordinary moment and decided that she was going to take a stand and to be something significant for other people. And
Wow.
from that time forth, her life has been hard and beautiful. Difficult because she chooses to be that light in the darkness, and also extremely miraculous. And so, for women who are contemplating leadership, I would suggest passion and some things you can take a stand for. We've had a lot of
Mhm.
fighting against, as you know, in the world in the last several years, and it's ripping our society and people apart. But if
Mhm.
you can find something that you can stand for, that can bring people in healing together, that
Right.
does extraordinary things in the world, ooh, I have seen women shine. And that is one of my favorite things to witness on the planet.
Agreed. Agreed. In reference to, people being put in a position where they can either retreat or assume leadership, I think about as we talk about some of the tragedies in our country, the women who have lost, children because of violence, and they've become, spokespersons because they lost a child in a school shooting or by some other means. And, this quiet little mom housewife now is out, a spokesperson raising awareness, lobbying for better gun laws, gun control, or more security at the schools. And it is just how someone can go through something like that and it's like being forged, going through the fire and coming out
Yeah.
stronger. with instead of alloys, LIs coming out stronger. I've seen it and I admire it. And I think we all have that capability in us if we haven't done it already and just been so busy with the process that we didn't realize, you know what, wow, I'm more durable, I'm more resilient, I'm more strong than I ever was because of that difficult thing I went
Mhm.
through. And all of this is a story that you can share, that you can inspire someone else and share. You know, it's a way to love on the world, really. And that's what you're encouraging us to do. And I appreciate that, Bridget Cook-Burch. Before we go, please tell listeners and viewers, since this will be both, how they can learn more about your retreats, your books, your services. You've got so much to offer.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And I would welcome anyone that's, looking at even discovering more about themselves. And so if you have a book idea or you don't yet have a book idea, our Inspired Writers Retreat is amazing. But what's beautiful is we now have an ability to take you from the very beginning to publishing. So whether that's in New York or whether that's indie publishing, we have the mechanisms and the
Ooh.
leadership for that. And so we love that. So if you go to yourinspiredstory.com,
Mhm.
you can find out all about our events, our coaching, our classes, and especially our Inspired Writers Retreats. We always do them in a beautiful, natural setting. My favorite is up at a beautiful turquoise lake where we have this large and gorgeous cabin. And we have personal chefs that will take care of your food needs and the dishes, so we can just concentrate on your book for 3.5 intensive days and nights. And it is amazing and wonderful. And as we talked about, transformational. So
Uh,
yourinspiredstory.com or inspiredwritersretreat.com.
and we'll definitely have those again in the show notes. So if you're listening, just check back and you'll be able to find those if you're not able to write it down. So excited to have you here, New York Times best-selling author, and really really amazing story, a personal story as well. I'm inspired and I thank you, and thank you for listening, for watching. If you're on YouTube, please remember to subscribe, like, and share, and join us again next week for another fun, informative episode. Thank you.
Thank you.